welcome to the first episode of our series on working strategies. My name is Xhanti Payi, and I'm joined by my colleagues Chantal and Katia. And today we'll be discussing creating lasting value. Now, South Africans talk a lot about value, especially in our conversation around GDP. But what we actually mean by that, what are the true and internalized ways in which we should think about this as business and as leaders? In this episode, we will discuss that in particular, especially as we think about sustainable value. Let me start with you, Katia. When we think about value, what do we actually mean? And I'd like you, Chantal, to also answer the same question.
Well, value is very contextual. And in our context, we help businesses all the time, and corporates generally think about value in similar ways management consultants do. And that's around the quantifiable value that we try to drive within businesses, often revenue and cost optimizations. But reaching these kinds of financial results are normally driven through values within organizations, things like efficiencies and lots of effectiveness. But those are really financial. I think, Chantal, you better suited to speak to some of those more, what shall we say, less quantifiable, but extremely important kinds of value.
Sure. So for me, building on what you're saying, Katia, I think I'll draw from the integrated reporting framework and the King Code. So value for me, and the way I'll probably use it today, is more aligned with those 6 capitals. So financial capital being one, and then we've got another 5. And we've got to think about how we wisely use, perhaps trade off between the 6 capitals. I hope I can name them all, but human, social, intellectual, manufactured, and natural. And all of those actually interplay, and it's how we use and trade them off, for me, that creates value. And you've got to have a time element in there too. So you might have some short-term trade-offs that can create a certain kind of value, and it's typically in things like efficiencies, revenue growth, market gains, that kind of thing. But then also longer-term value. So what does it mean for our broader economy or a broader society? And how do we think about short and long-term value is something that we can probably unpack.
Sure. Katia, in your work, how have you actually been supporting organizations and clients in this field of thinking about value?
So we like to help organizations reimagine what value could mean for them. And it's similar to thinking about it from the capital's perspective, right? Value ultimately, let's say, to an organization is that financial value. So measuring that's often something we can help to do, understanding what does that look like in terms of potential benefit for your business. Like I said, that could come in the form of revenue or cost. But when you start to really break it down within the business, think about people as value mechanisms, right? And that's what we do. So we look at the people, what they're doing, break that down to the smallest sum. Literally, what do you do every day in your work? That could mean, for some, engaging with clients in the front line, and for others, it's a back office function that actually their day-to-day work is just enabling what that front can do, right? That's at its basic point. But then what we do is we say, if we started to do work a little bit smarter, what does that financial value actually look like? And then what does the people value look like? Some of those measurements might be mood. So how happy are your people? In one client, for example, we actually changed a team KPI to be, how happy is your team? And in doing that and improving that, you see people get more skilled, solving more problems on a daily basis. And so then think about what impact that may have on society. Have more great examples there, but I think I'll hold off. Maybe Chantal, maybe you want to add into something like that. I think we've worked together before on some of those things. Yeah.
Look, I think it's quite interesting actually that you actually center people in terms of creating value, because so much of what is happening, so much of adding value has actually been given to machines. But it's quite great to actually look into what people and the value people add. Chantal, in sustainability, how are you thinking about value and how you help clients in that way?
Sure. So from a sustainability point of view, here in terms of the way that we approach our strategy work with clients and setting them up to execute those strategies, we're thinking about how do we embed the framing and the language around what value is. Often we hear license to operate, social license to operate. So we're trying to build in that thinking about a long-term viability, long-term resilience into the strategy, the core business strategy of a business. So that requires us to think about, well, what is the operating context likely to look like in the future? Where are the drivers, the pressures, potential opportunities going to arise? And again, we think of it for the 6 capitals, just to keep that in your mind. And we've got to think about then, if we're talking about those risks and opportunities, how the business is going to capitalize on that, drawing on some of the thinking that you've just named, Katia. We've got to be thinking about then, what is the ultimate business impact going to be? So we have to frame what we think about for sustainability and the climate change or nature responses in terms of the ultimate impacts on society, the economy, and then of course the business. It does also need to have that commercial lens applied. And that's really what we're trying to do when we unpack and problem solve for sustainability strategy, and why value in terms of those 6 capitals, and wisely sort of thinking through the trade-offs you have to make. Do I trade off financial capital to upskill? What am I going to get out of that trade-off between financial capital and human capital? And how am I going to then set up the business to succeed into the future? And hopefully what you're seeing then is that sustainability strategy cannot be separate from the core business strategy. And it has to be forward-looking, cannot just be about compliance for now. It also has to be about that future operating context and those trends and drivers that we need to actively manage to make sure that the business is then viable into the long term.
And what I really like about the strategic approach to thinking about value, right, where my approach often and our team's approach in working with our clients often operational, is that it's really making you focus on value as really broad, right? Something that isn't something where you're putting your chickens, eggs all in one basket rather than chickens, right? Eggs in one basket. Rather, it's a network of value and it's all reinforcing each other. So it's critical to look at business from all of these lenses.
And it's quite refreshing, actually, because I suppose in our field, we're always measuring value that has gone by, that's been created. But Chantal, you speak about actually looking ahead in terms of the value you're about to create and the impact of that value. As we really try and wrap this up, because time is not on our side, I want each of you to sort of give us some key things that clients should be thinking about, some pointers perhaps, as we close this conversation. I'll start with you, Katia.
Are you sure? If you don't mind, I want to use an example, because I think that really drives home what I think is the key takeaway around value is, and it's actually about South Africa. So within South Africa, we have an amazing market for outsourcing. And outsourcing often gets a bad rap, and it has a lot of different aspects in the industry. But one phenomenal aspect of it, particularly in South Africa, is that globally, it's really looked to outsource customer service. And that's because we are exceptionally good at providing great customer service. And if you think about it, often people that are working in contact centers and different institutions providing great customer service for many organizations globally and locally are the youth. They're the young, vibrant, well-articulate individuals that actually are the ones that we're trying to drive to get jobs and to be upskilled and to be the leaders of tomorrow. And so many people have had their first job in a call center, right? I work with somebody actually in my team that one of her first jobs was at a call center. And now she's a consultant with us. It gives you great sets of skills. And that's actually evolved and it's actually termed by Bapesa impact sourcing. So as a company, you can actually outsource, right? And in doing that, you're actually providing opportunities to youth to be upskilled. And so in your role, yes, your objective might be to provide a great service to your clients. But secondary to that, and in the same decision, you are also creating an opportunity for youth and building our economy in South Africa. So I really love that example because it's exactly what we take back to the first, think about the cost, think about revenue. That is value. Ultimately, as business professionals, that is something you have to look after. But don't forget the bigger picture. and make sure that whatever you're doing, and Chantal, you must probably be better suited to kind of speak more to the fact that you want it to be almost that same decision, not an and decision all the time, right? That CSI decision. You want it to be enveloped value, shared value.
Exactly.
With society, yeah.
That's an interesting perspective, actually, probably quite refreshing, because when you think about outsourcing, it's almost like companies, taking this thing away that we don't want to do.
Yeah.
But actually, the perspective you present is quite refreshing. On your side, Chantal?
So for me, and I think it ties with you, Katia, it's about perhaps the language that we use when we talk value. There was a really interesting quote, and forgive me, I don't know who said it, but it's not everything that makes money is of value.
Yes.
And not everything that doesn't get an invoice, so doesn't have a payment attached, is free. And I think we need to be framing our thinking and our decision making about how we preserve, how we create, and also how we erode value over time. So decisions we make now, and I think last year in our CEO survey, we spoke about a dilemma that our CEOs face in terms of managing short and long-term decisions. And I think what we have to do when we're thinking about value is framing our conversations about what is actually free or what is just being value eroded because it's not something that I as a business or a leader have to pay for. And what does it cost our society and our economy? And then how do I position perhaps to create an opportunity in that so that instead of seeing a value eroded in the broader society or economy, that actually make a business decision to capitalize on that. There's commerciality and there's that positive broader impact. And for me, that is about value creation in its essence.
Well, fantastic. I wish we had more time to actually engage on this. That's all we've been able to discuss for today, but please look out for the next episode in this series dealing with inclusive economies. From ourselves, thank you very, very much for having joined.